Welcome to the Inner Athlete Podcast, where we discuss all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring. Welcome back. We're going to be talking about comparing athletes. Well, not comparing athletes. Athletes comparing themselves to others. Now, that's pretty much what sport is. Is it basically a grand comparison to one another? Who's the better athlete? NFL draft, perfect example of that. Trying to get onto a squad for the AFL, like trying to make the cut.
Dally
M. Any awards or anything like that, players awards, MVPs, all these awards and accolades, it's always a comparison. It's always trying to be better than the next person. Individual sports, prime example of that. You're just trying to be an nth second faster than your competitor or whatever it may be to win. But yeah, what was the quote that you said before?
The quote I said was, "Comparison is the thief of joy."
So, what does that really mean?
Quite often when we are comparing ourselves to others, we quite often come to a negative emotion or a negative result or a negative feeling. Oh, why am I not good enough? No, I'll never be good enough. Things like that. So comparison can be quite a toxic thing to do, and most people might ask, "Hey, don't compare on yourself, only do that." And while that might be right, we think comparison is the thief of joy. It's stealing the joy you get from seeing your own progress. I think that's what the quote's trying to say.
Yeah. Well, let's zoom out a little bit more. Let's look at social media. Social media is kind of like the melting pot of comparison. We follow people that we want to emulate, or that we respect, or that we find helpful, and we want to be a little bit more like them. And that in itself is a level of comparison, which is not a bad thing in some cases. There's two type of idols that we have in life. One is one person who's 1 or 2 steps ahead. I've definitely had my issues with comparison to others in the past. But then we have like people who are just like astronomically far away. So you know, The Rock, and Gary Vaynerchuk. I say John Olomu as well. For those that don't know who he is, maybe just Google him. You might. First rugby superstar. And we these are the people that are put on pedestals, and people consistently compare themselves to others, and they want to be more like these people. They want to try and take their habits or some characteristics away of them in order to install in themselves, in order to be a little bit more like them. But the problem is, though, they will never be them because they are not them. I think that's the real key message. That is the thief of joy. When you compare yourself to others, inadvertently you're saying, I want to be that person. And that's what kind of kills the person's self-being or self-worth. That's like, oh, if only I was this person. If only I had this amount of money. If only I had a 6-pack. If only I was like 8% body fat. If only I could bench press 200 kilos, blah, blah, blah. It would just go on to the cows come home.
If only this, then what? What does that mean to you?
Yeah. What if you get there and then what?
Then what? It's like, what if you're still not happy?
It's an endless rabbit hole, really. So it's interesting because sometimes you need to kind of like take a step back and become more content with who you are, with yourself, and kind of sitting in that. It's like, okay, cool. I am this. I am that. But I'm fine with it. I can deal with it, but I can improve on it. I think.
Yeah. Going back to what Trent said before, it's like, if only I want to be this person, and this person has this characteristic that I want. That's just an ego thing. It's like the best way I can explain ego is that ego is what your subconscious wants you to be. It's who you want to see yourself. So if you say to yourself, "Oh, I want to be a really good athlete. I want to be known as the fastest AFL athlete," and then the moment you get outrun by another person in your game, that's attack on your ego because you're not the fastest athlete anymore. So rather than accepting yourself for you and what your abilities are, we compare ourselves to others who are inherently better than us, but the people we compare to have their own issues and their own things that they're trying to get better at as well. That's
Yeah,
the thing we miss.
it's such a vicious cycle,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that I don't think it actually has an end. That's the thing. You can go so far, say, if you accumulate, all this wealth, accumulate this body where you enhance yourself, whatever it may be. I'm not expanding out on this. Then, and you still, and you get there, and this is why with millionaires and billionaires, they're actually still miserable. I think going back to, I think they did it. I can't remember. I think Forbes did an article, and they talked about, in terms of how much money that you made, in terms of like the happiness meter. And it's like, I think if you're earning I think this is in US dollars, I think it's earning between $70,000 and $80,000. That was considered like the metric or where people were most happy.
It was about 100K, 110K or something like that in Australia, I think it was.
Yeah, it was something like that, which is still quite a bit of money in Australia at the moment. Not in Sydney, it's probably just above average.
Chump change.
Yeah, literally, you're still going to 7-Eleven for your dollar coffees. But let's bring it back to athletes now. Let's bring it back to the gym. Why is the gym and sport so different in terms of like the comparison and competition?
So why is the gym and sport different?
Yeah.
So the gym, I guess it comes back to what type of person you are. In the gym, you're really in the gym. You can still battle with comparison, but if we come into the gym with the right mindset, the gym is a sanctuary or a place for us to work on ourselves. We shouldn't be going to the gym to look at the guy in the stringer shirt, yelling at himself because he's slamming his biceps. We should be focusing on ourselves, headphones on, coming in with a clear purpose and a clear direction to work on ourselves, to better ourselves. Anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, because it's really just noise.
Yeah.
It's all just nonsense around you than anything else. A gym is a really good place to make some level of self-improvement. Like we hear stories all the time. We had an older client that I worked with. He lost 23 kilos in about 6 months. Phenomenal job. Totally nervous about the gym. And he just embraced it completely. And it was just, this is me. This is my world. This is what I'm going to focus on. And he focused on himself. And yeah, then his relationship with food improved. His relationship with his kids improved, and also his wife. And then and also his staff, because he works in a management role, and just the way people perceive him now is a lot different than it was in the past as well. So he really, really worked on himself. Then he worked on his internal world first. Then his external world started to make some changes, or started to have some level of influence with that. But I know, like, for yourself, you've had issues with body weight issues through your teenage years. I've had my own qualms and issues with body weight issues a few times actually, and just kind of like, we always come back to the gym because it's kind of like the solid foundation that we have to make some level of self-improvement. We can continue to develop ourselves here, kind of work and push through some mental barriers that we do have on ourselves, and we can just begin to accept who we are, and kind of like we accept these flaws. And my squat's never going to be massive or anything like that, and I always wanted a decent squat. I've kind of accepted that fact, but my deadlift is actually not that bad, so I'll take that on the chin. And what was that quote that you said to me before we started?
So the quote I said was, "Comparison is the thief of joy." So essentially what that quote means is that in the process of comparison and comparing ourselves to others, that we're stealing our own intrinsic sense of joy that we get from succeeding and progression and consistently improving over time.
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of the team sports and individual sports athletes that we deal with, that it's always a comparison to someone else. It's always, is this person better than this person? Then as a result, is this person going to come into the team, and is that person getting dropped? With individual sports, it's usually about times specifically, or or distance, or whatever it may be. And it's always that direct comparison that we have. It's like, oh, if I was like this person, or I just want to be able to beat this person, I'm in competition with this person. we kind of like lose the focus of the person who's actually racing, which is you, and you can only control you. You cannot control or really influence all the other competitors because they're probably having the same anxiety or anxiousness that when it comes to comparison when they compare themselves to others as well. But let's look at the gym. I know we said about sport, but what does make the gym a little bit different to sport specifically?
Yeah, so I guess in the gym, you're running your own race. So whether it be you're training in an athlete, or if you're training in your own commercial gym, or if you're training by yourself for bodybuilding, powerlifting, or just your own self-betterment, that you're really there for yourself. You can't really compare yourself to someone else in the gym. If you are, that's probably not the right mindset to have. But in the gym, you turn up, you focus on yourself, you focus on your own self-betterment. Yeah, that's what I was sort of getting at.
Yeah, because we've got a few swimmers here, and they do compete against each other, and they're like I guess you call it rival clubs or just clubs in the area, and they compete in the same races and whatnot. And the one thing we really push with juniors is really the development side that we really emphasize. They try and compare themselves to others, whether it is whoever's the top swimmer in their class or the age category to who's made it to worlds, and they really compare themselves, and everyone's kind of like taking their own journey in order to get there as well. Everyone's had the the highs and lows and peaks and valleys with their development. And the one thing that we've really noticed with a lot of the athletes here, when we remove them or remove the stimulus or kind of the noise around comparing themselves to others, or this person did this, and keeping an eye on their rivals or something like that, the attention is on them, but we need to shift it back to the individual. It's like, okay, cool, what's going to enable me to drop 2 seconds on the 200 fly or something like that? And when we start to kind of break down the X's and O's of what they can do on a daily or weekly or on a monthly basis, we can start to, rather than compare themselves to others, we can compare themselves to where they once were, to where they are now, and where they want to go. And when we have that clear intentions and planning and consistent check-ins with the athletes, it just makes it so much easier to recognize that they actually are making progress and making improvements over time. So a big thing that we do here, and we really push this, and Dave would know this because he's been here with us for quite a while, is we regularly check in with the athletes and ask them how their training is going. A lot of them, they get training PBs almost weekly as well in certain sets that they repeat, from one training block to another, and they get really good times on that, or they just feel better and it just feels easier and they're recovering a lot better. It's like, cool, that's great, that's progress. When we accumulate these small wins or the process orientated goals, more specifically, it will lead more to the outcome base, which is faster times, qualification for nationals, and just more recognition that comes from that as well.
Yeah, I like what you said about just process-based goals. So even the process of setting goals, rather than having outcome-based goals, look at the little checkpoints you have along the way, and that's a really good way to get away from comparing yourself to others, but comparing yourself to yourself, what you were before. And I like the quote, you've sort of alluded to it before, but is you can't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 48. But it's really good to compare your chapter 1 to your chapter 2, or to compare your chapter 5 to your chapter 2 or your chapter 3. In the case of PBs, where you might look at year 1 of swimming versus year 5 of swimming. If you've dropped 20 seconds, that's amazing. That's 20 seconds in 2 years or 4 years, whatever it is.
And the really important part is actually measuring the progress over time. We need actual data. We need actual results. And that can come in various forms. Obviously, for swimmers, it's going to come in times, or their not so much their ranking. That's kind of like the comparison to someone else. But in terms of have their time dropped in training, their time dropped in competition, that's going to be the main one. When it comes to team sports, it's a little bit different. I think the best thing is actually film for a lot of the kids. Like, or the other thing is we've had Manny's one of our soccer players, came here with shin splints. He would run and his shins would just blow up. And you'd have to take, 3-4 days off from any loading. And then he'd be able to play again. But his performance would start over time, decline. And what we did is basically fixed them up. No shin splints. Haven't heard about shin splints in, I don't know, 4 months at least. So it's been really good. It's making progress. He had some lower back issues as well. We managed to nip that in the butt as well. So we managed to make some modifications to his training program here. Every time he comes in, I know Coach Matt looks after him and he checks in with him. How's the body feeling? How's it going? He's like, great, good. Nothing to report back on. How'd you perform? Really good. Scored X amount of goals and set up a few plays as well. Then what we've actually done is we've got him to recognise from where he was, being able to play a soccer match, have 4 days off from staying off his legs, to training 4 or 5 times a week, or including a game or 2 games because it was school soccer as well. And he's absolutely crushing it. And he got invited to a academy in Phillip Island during the last during the term 1 school holidays as well. So he's made some tremendous progress, and the progress has come from overcoming these injuries, recognizing overcome these injuries, and when injuries do pop up as well, we can just start to modify. It's all right, this worked last time, let's see how it goes, and we just continue to make these tweaks, so on and so forth. Then as a result, we can focus more on his performance on field and start to make those minor tweaks, so he continues to be recognized for all the, overcoming certain issues that he has. Then he would become a lot more recognized for what he's been able to do as well. And that's been a really good process of having that internal focus. I think Stefan would call it internal loci of control. Is that what it's called?
Internal locus of control.
Yeah. Internal locus of control. So you're focusing specifically on yourself and what you can control. An external focus is considered everything outside of that. So you could say the weather, your family, friends, coach, all that jazz. Everything you can't really control, but you can control yourself within that environment. And yeah, Manny's done a phenomenal job in order to overcome this. Scoring goals pretty much every single week. And we're just making minor tweaks to his performance so we can make him a bit more well-rounded of an athlete.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, I think recognizing the small wins, even if this is 1% progression each week, over time that adds up. So small wins consistently over time add up to very big wins. So I think today's youth are looking to make extremely big jumps in progression, jump up rankings 10 spots, or be able to come first when you've been coming fifth or fourth consistently. Is if you're jumping up rankings or placings or small wins each week or each session, that's important because you can recognize small wins as progressive steps to a larger goal.
Yeah, and another example would be Mia. For those that don't know, or Mia, you guys wouldn't know Mia, but Mia, when she came to us, she's a swimmer, she's a sprinter.
Shout out Mia.
Yeah, shot Mia. And she had heaps of issues. Like, I won't say heaps of issues, but like 2 main issues. One was a hip and 2 was a knee. With the training, managed to overcome her hip pain. I know when she was kind of in the early phases with us, sometimes her hip would blow up, especially from doing butterfly, the dolphin kick specifically in the turns. And we managed to make tweaks, work with her physio as well, keep the focus on her. All right, I want you to do this before training, before you swim. I want you to do this before training here at Inner Athlete. And we just continue to develop, and eventually we found the right recipe for her. Well, it's took a little bit of time, working in conjunction with everyone else, with her coaches and her physio, that she's pain-free. In her hip. Then what happened afterwards was her knee, which was a pre-existing, because she was able to produce more force through her hips, able to utilize her hips and the lower back a bit more, which exacerbated issue with her knee in the past. We managed to fix that up quite well, and every time we check in with her, she's pretty much fine. But sometimes we just need to regulate her volume, her kick volume. So I just said, like, talk to the coach, dial it back a little bit, and we can slowly build your tolerance to the kick volume as well. Because obviously, what we've done every single time a knee blows up or the hip blows up is eliminate that. So your body's not accustomed to doing that as well. And that's kind of like having the internal focus. She's running her own race, metaphorically. And as a result, her times have started to drop, and she's absolutely crushing it at the moment.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the kids that start up here in athlete, where they have the little niggles or injury and things like that, they feel like they're at the bottom of their mountain, essentially. So they feel like they're at the bottom of a mountain, and then we slowly start climbing up this mountain, and then they might look ahead like, oh, I'm still not where I want to be. This person I used to race against is the best in the country or the best in the state, but us as coaches and their swimming coaches should be able to help them look back down that mountain and look where they came from to see how far they've come. Yeah,
and even with like we call them Gen Pop youth, or just like youth that just want to get just strong and jacked.
Even that.
Yeah, with like Dex, Max, Anarude, and all that. They were the same. It's like they were kind of like very not anxiety driven or anything like that, but they're very comparison to others in the gym. And then you start to see the focus shift quite a lot. And they've been with us for over a year, all three boys. And you start to see the perception of they're really taking ownership and accountability of their own training, and they're very, very processed. They understand, and also goal outcome driven.
You understand the steps along the way to get to the end.
Yeah, like Anarude, he's deadlifting over 100 kilos, for a 16-year-old.
Nearly squatting 100 kilos already.
Oh, is it? No, he's deadlifting like 115, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
squatting heaps, benching heaps, deadlifting heaps.
Yeah, he's a very lean kid as well, very lean. So he'd probably be no more than 60 kilos, I reckon. Quite tall,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's been with us for quite a while, and the good thing is he knew what his goal wanted to be, his outcome goal. I wanted to deadlift 100, squat 100, bench 60. It's all right, cool, that's great. And then we just slowly gave him goals. Dave's been looking after him. He gave him, this is your goal for this session, this is your goal for this training block, and so on and so forth. And he's just slowly chipped away, and he's made some phenomenal progress as a result.
Just asking him every week, how you feel like you're going? Yeah, really good. Happy with your progress? Yeah, really good. Don't change a thing. Just keep the train moving.
Yeah, that's it. They just keep it moving. That's it.
That's it.
But yeah, what can let's wrap it up with something practical. What can athletes do, or even like kids in the gym that just, they might be daunted by other kids of the same age and have been in the gym for a couple of years now and looking a little bit jacked and lifting relatively heavy. What are some key takeaways for parents, but also for the kids as well, to kind of remove the anxiety that can come with comparing themselves to others?
I think, just remember, everyone started where you are now. So, Michael Jordan got cut from his high school team. He started exactly the same position as a lot of every other kid started. Is don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 48. Just progress at your own rate. And, if you're looking at these other kids in the gym and you're like, oh, they're just better than me in every way possible, have a chat to them. Ask them for advice. One of the best pieces of advice I got is, if I'm in the gym, if I'm intimidated by someone else, go up to the biggest person in the gym, ask for advice, because they'll emphasize and understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and everyone, like you said before, everyone's had a very similar starting point as well. So a lot of kids that have, 14, 15, 16, they get into the gym, have no idea what they're doing. They'll just kind of go with their buddies because they feel self-conscious. And then, like, when there's more people around, it's like, oh, we don't look like I'm not going to make myself look like a total idiot in the gym as well. But, majority of the time, well, actually, no one really cares unless you're doing something dangerous. That's the only time.
Yeah.
I think for me, in terms of comparison, is actually having a diary. I think the power of tracking what you do. So what I've done in the past is I just have like a normal notebook, it costs $1 or something from Woolies or something like that, and just date and jot down how I'm feeling before the session. So I spend, maybe 3 to 5 minutes. And this is when I was taking, my training, quite serious, and doing a lot more weightlifting based work. And as a result, you start to understand how you're actually feeling and what's feeling good, what you're rating your training sessions out of 10. Could have pushed myself a lot more? Did I push myself a little bit too hard through that? And I think that's a really good point for athletes, is to actually just jot down how you're actually feeling, because it takes you from comparing yourself to someone else on the day or wherever they are, whatever time, brings the focus back to yourself. That's number one. Number two, then you've got data points, well, the subjective data of the rate of progress. What was the feedback from pre-season to finals? You can actually track that specifically. And if you use like a metric out of 10, I'm feeling a 7 out of 10 today, feeling pretty good. Could have slept another hour or something like that, or could have gone to bed a little bit early or something like that. Okay, then you make notes and start making these small modifications in order to help you achieve your performance outcome-based goal.
Yeah, and even on the flip side of that, like if you're a non-athlete person in the gym, for myself, for an example, when I was back in 2018, I was squatting 220 kilos for 1 rep. Now I'm squatting 300. And that's happened over a 4-year period. But I've filmed that 220 squat. I've filmed and I've recorded every single session and rep I've done since 2017, 2018. I can look back now and go, wow, I've improved heaps. Even though I didn't feel like it at each session, I can look back over the years and look, wow, I've improved so much.
Yeah, and it's all those consistent training sessions, or 3-4 per week, whatever it may be. And like, you can't see it on a ground level, but once you look at it from a different perspective and you've tracked it over a period of time,
consistency beats intensity.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, you just got to turn up, and that helps you being consistent with that diary. And it could be something simple that you do. It just makes it easier to recognize you are making progress. Like, okay, I'm still moving forward. There's been ups and downs along the way.
Just move the needle.
Yeah, you're just moving the needle 1 spot, 2 spots within a training cycle or a training year or something like that.
Stay consistent, keep showing up.
That's it. Talk to you guys later.
Catch up.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.